Greetings, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for ChrisSharrah Yancy's final DBA dissertation defense. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all faculty members, committee members, and guests on this call. ChrisSharrah has undertaken a very important study exploring the impact of emotional intelligence on the leadership effectiveness of religious leaders in religious organizations. She addressed this study using a phenomenological research design to explore the lived experiences of religious leaders from diverse denominations, exploring how emotional intelligence enhances their ability to influence and inspire others. Her research not only contributes valuable insights to the field of leadership studies, but also highlights the critical role of emotional intelligence in religious leadership, a subject that has not been explored as deeply as it deserves. ChrisSharrah's dissertation and academic rigor have been exemplary throughout this process, thanks to the amazing support she has received from her committee members, Dr. Peters and Dr. Fabian. Today, ChrisSharrah will be presenting chapters 1 through 5 of her dissertation. Following the presentation of chapter 5, we will open the floor for questions, beginning with her committee members and then inviting other faculty members to participate as well. Without further ado, I am pleased to welcome ChrisSharrah to take it away. ChrisSharrah, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Altama. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope all that is well with each of you. And I would like to take the opportunity to say thank you to each of you for being on the call today. Welcome to the presentation of my dissertation defense. My topic is Emotional Intelligence for Effective Leadership in Religious Institutions, a Phenomenological Exploration. My name is ChrisSharrah Yancy, as Dr. Altama introduced me before. Before we get started, I would like to take care of some housekeeping and introduce my committee. I would like to extend a big, huge thank you to each of you for your time, your expertise, and the gift of feedback that you've given me on this journey. What a ride this has been, and I truly feel blessed in this moment. My dissertation committee is a dream team, as you can see, chaired by Dr. Altama, better known as Dr. I, Dr. Tara Peters, and also Dr. Lisa Fairbairn. Thank you so much. I will also acknowledge my family and dedicate my love and appreciation to you for your support, your inspiration, and your prayers that have motivated me during this time. Thank you so much. Just a little snippet about me. I have my bachelor's in political science and graduated in 2006 from Texas A&M University in College Station. I have my bachelor's and master's in business administration from Northwood University, and also a part of the inaugural August 2020 DBA class. I have extensive experience in HR leadership, nonprofit organizations, community work, and also religious leadership ministry work. I am a proud wife and mom, a new mom, and someone that just noticed there could be a connection between emotional intelligence and effective leadership. Let's look at our agenda for today. We will start with chapter 1 that will cover the statement of the problem, Purpose of the study, research questions, significance of the study, the conceptual framework. Chapter 2, we will talk about the literature review. Chapter 3 will cover the methodology, research design, sample and population, data collection and analysis, and ethical issues. Chapter 4, we will discuss the findings and results. And Chapter 5 will be implications, limitations, and the conclusion, ending with our reference page and time for Q&A. Statement of the problem. As employees leave offices due for various reasons, including relational dynamics with leaders, a similar trend may be affecting religious institutions. According to Oni's 2010 research, he states, a major indicator of success of a church is based on increase in attendance. Then churches in America are in trouble. Whether any religious leader or non-religious leader struggles to manage with their emotions, it can create an inconsistent environment that can erode trust or impede growth. According to Means 1993 study, the most basic cause of ineffectiveness and failure in leadership in religious institutions is the inability to build and sustain meaningful relationships. It is a growing concern that religious institutions have either plateaued or in decline. Additionally, this can lead to feelings of disengagement from members, which can ultimately weaken the institution's foundation and the long-term viability for those religious institutions. So we have a link between maybe declining attendance and problems in leadership effectiveness. Emphasize the essential need to examine the role of emotional intelligence in religious leadership. It also poses the question to better understand those leaders that may be experiencing growth. What are the leadership attributes that they possess? Therefore, it is necessary for religious leaders to prioritize emotional intelligence to ensure the success and longevity of their institutions. As we bridge this knowledge gap, recognizing the relationships between emotional intelligence and leadership, efficacy becomes vital. The connection between leadership within religious institutions and the business world may not be immediately apparent, but there are several parallels and potential points of intersection. Religious Freedom and Business Foundation states that there are many religions in the United States, and combined, the religion contributes to 1.2 trillion of the socioeconomic value in the U.S. economy. This study was conducted by an organization called Faith Counts. So we literally see here that faith does count. So here we see that faith does play a unique role in the socioeconomic behavior of Americans. As we look at the purpose of the study is to explore the role of emotional intelligence of religious leaders in religious institutions through a qualitative lens. Emotional intelligence is a crucial asset for all leaders as it cultivates exceptional communication, fosters trust with relationships. By delving into the challenges and the opportunities faced by religious leaders, this study aims to provide valuable insight into development and also targeted strategies to leverage emotional intelligence within religious institutions. By understanding all this, we can foster effective leadership. We can build stronger congregational relationships, and we can also anticipate growth. By understanding the role of emotional intelligence in religious leadership, researchers and practitioners can contribute to the cultivation of compassionate, ethical, and visionary leaders who are capable of guiding their communities with wisdom, integrity, and resilience. The main overarching research question of this study is, how do religious leaders from diverse denominations integrate emotional intelligence into their leadership practices? To gain a deeper understanding of this phenomenon, the sub-questions will be explored. How do religious leaders understand and make sense of their emotional intelligence in the context of their leadership roles? In what ways do religious leaders describe integrating specific EI competencies into their daily leadership activities? And also, what challenges do leaders face in developing emotional intelligence skills within their leadership roles? So, why is this significant, you may ask? The significance of this study is to bring an increased awareness of emotional intelligence as it relates to religious leadership, but also enhances the leader's ability to influence others. Self-awareness is one of the key foundations of empathy, and research published by the Journal of Cognitive Enhancement by Bachler in 2017 says, we understand ourselves, but getting a deeper understanding of ourselves, it helps us to understand others. That's that self-awareness coming in. Effective leadership requires the capacity to empathize with others and to lead with emotional intelligence. EI enhances a religious leader's ability to inspire and to connect. These connections allow for more authentic and meaningful connections and interactions with their congregants. According to research by Lancaster in 2020, a religious leader must be emotionally intelligent because it determines the effectiveness of their pastoral leadership. So the significance, looking at a growing economy, as we see the changes in demographics, pastors, clergy, and other religious leaders have a great business opportunity. And emotional intelligence plays a huge role as we are navigating all these components for our decision making. This research is intended to bring value to religious leaders and religious institutions, including faith-based nonprofits, chaplaincy in the healthcare sector, as well as providing continual leadership development to all religious leaders. Some key terms I would like to bring: emotional intelligence, social change, and also religious leadership. Religious leadership or spiritual leadership is a leadership style that emphasizes religious and spiritual beliefs and principles in a leadership role. This means that the leadership is focused and incorporates their focus on something bigger outside of the traditional leadership approaches. Emotional intelligence is the ability to manage both your emotions and others while around others, utilizing the 5 elements: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. The term was first coined in 1990 by researchers John Mayer and Peter Salvini, but was later popularized by the psychologist Daniel Goleman. And also social change model. According to Skindall in his 2017 research, this model was created in the Higher Education Institute of UCLA to enhance learning and facilitate positive social change. This model emphasizes the need to comprehend self and others to create a community of change. The social change model was built on these assumptions that leadership is socially responsible. It impacts change on behalf of others. Leadership is collaborative. Leadership is a process and not a position. Leadership should be value-based, and community involvement and service is a powerful vehicle for leadership. The purpose of this section is to introduce the theoretical and philosophical frameworks that are used in this study. The framework that frames the phenomenological study is the philosophies of Edmund Husserl. Edmund Husserl is considered to be the father of phenomenology. According to Husserl in 1997, the term lived experience is used to describe personal knowledge, experience, or firsthand accounts of a phenomenon gained as a result of involvement in daily life undertakings. The two conceptual frameworks to support this study are grounded in a conceptual domain called social change, as we discussed earlier. And first, emotional intelligence is discussed as a construct and a crucial component of effective leadership for religious leaders. The social change model emphasizes leadership development as a collaborative process. Emotional intelligence is connected to social change model as it enhances the leader's ability to understand and empathize with others. The connection between emotional intelligence and social change leadership highlights the importance of the interpersonal relationship and also the social awareness. By cultivating emotional intelligence alongside of social change model, leaders can enhance their effectiveness in mobilizing others and also fostering meaningful change. With both frameworks, we are able to dive a little deeper into the lived experience of leaders. And we'll discuss more about the conceptual frameworks in a literature review in the later slides. So you may ask, why does this study matter? What are the business implications? The late Maya Angelou once said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Once social interactions are initiated, emotional awareness and emotional regulation become essential factors in affecting the quality of leadership. Emotionally intelligent leadership has a profound impact on the business world, as we have practical implications in examining the experience of emotional intelligence of religious leaders, which leads to the contributions to the business practice and provides a foundation for decision making. We see emerging trends and data to emerge these trends to support leadership development within religious institutions that will give us tools for analysis, for growth within religious institutions. All these factors collectively contribute to a company's success, resilience, and long-term sustainability in a competitive and rapidly changing market. I would like to transition to chapter 2, where we will cover our literature review. There were a few topics investigated in the literature review. You will see literature on emotional intelligence and effective leadership, leadership effectiveness in religious institutions, phenomenological studies on emotional intelligence. As we look at the literature review on emotional intelligence and effective leadership, as discussed during my dissertation proposal, Barbudo and Rabach in their 2006 research linked emotional intelligence to transformational leadership. In this research, they questioned 80 officials as leaders and the staff to examine the link between emotional intelligence and transformational leadership. The researchers discovered a link between the two as aspects of transformative leadership, including inspirational motivation and individualized consideration. Other research includes Husserl's 2022 research that explores the importance of emotional intelligence and transformational leadership as well, but the behaviors specifically on female leaders. This study investigates gender leadership gaps by specifying personality-based theoretical mechanisms that enhance transformational leadership. Practical data to show how emotional intelligence improves leadership effectiveness of female leaders in their distinct situations through the so-called leadership advantage. The highlights of emotional intelligence competencies displayed by the female leaders in Hasu's 2022 research explain how they relate to their capacity, how they inspire and motivate their followers, and how they create innovation and promote a common vision. Other literature that was reviewed is leadership effectiveness in religious institutions. Researcher Fry, in his 2003 research, argues that leaders in religious contexts must possess a high level of emotional intelligence to connect with their congregants on a deeper level. Fry introduces the concept of spiritual leadership and its impact on organizational effectiveness. The research argues how leaders with emotional intelligence can create positive organizational culture and contribute to leadership development. Fry's methodology is built around hope and faith, in which he believes that these are all positive outcomes in the ability to persevere in the face of adversity. Also, in Lancaster's 2020 research here, we see that the study analyzes emotional intelligence competencies of religious leaders and their impact on leadership effectiveness. The study examines the importance of EI in enhancing leadership capabilities of religious leaders. The study's findings highlight the importance of emotional intelligence in improving religious leaders' relational dynamics, communication effectiveness, and also their leadership performance. Additionally, Lancaster, in his 2020 research, has practical significance for the development of strengthening and also emotional intelligence competencies along religious leaders to foster effective and impactful leadership within religious institutions. As we look at phenomenological studies on emotional intelligence, based on the literature review, there was a lack of empirical evidence regarding lived experiences of religious leaders and the integration of emotional intelligence. According to Beeman's 2011 research, leaders with high emotional intelligence can create sustainable businesses during trying times. This study explored the phenomenon to recognize the effect on emotional intelligence on small business leadership during economic and emotional times of stress. In this research, Beeman interviewed 11 small business leaders in the attempt to just understand emotional intelligence as it relates to small business leaders. The results of this study added value to the business and research community by providing current and future business leaders a means of scalability of emotional intelligence during economic and emotional duress. The findings heighten the awareness of emotional intelligence, and also implicate this could further implications to increase profitability during businesses. In Stevens' 2007 research here, we see a phenomenological study on the perceptions of leaders' emotional intelligence and employee effective commitment. This research contributed to an existing body of knowledge by investigating the assumptions and beliefs related to leaders' emotional intelligence and employees' effective commitment, enabling organizations to see the significance of emotional intelligence and their leadership to turnover and profitability. This qualitative study seeks to address a significant gap in literature by delving into the realm of emotional intelligence and its impact on leadership effectiveness within religious institutions. with existing research sparsely covering this important topic. The goal of this study is to make a unique contribution by exploring emotional intelligence influences and the effectiveness of those leaders in the religious context. Other insights include exploring the context in which phenomenon occur by leadership in religious institutions, which can help identify patterns and themes that contribute to the theoretical understanding within EI and religious leaders. Based on this gap, I am investigating the research question. Based on the literature review, there was no empirical evidence regarding the lived experiences of religious leaders. This study is also the first to examine social change theory framework in connection with emotional intelligence. This rationale further explains the need to fill this gap in understanding and providing clarity. To answer the research question, how do religious leaders from diverse denominations integrate emotional intelligence into their leadership practices? As we talked about the frameworks, I would like to stop and share some areas where they are intertwined. The social change leadership model and emotional intelligence are connected frameworks that prioritize self-awareness, social awareness, and also relationship management. As we look at the information on the screen here, we see a connection between empathy and collaboration, which are two components of both social change model and also emotional intelligence. They both emphasize the significance of understanding and valuing others' perspective to foster effective teams and also relationship. The social change model leadership is built on 7 ideals known as the 7 C's: consciousness of self, congruence, commitment, common purpose, controversy with civility, collaboration, and citizenship. All 7 ideals collaborate to achieve change. Each dimension interacts with one another, as we see on the upcoming slides, where we see social skills, common purpose, and also citizenship, having that similarity of both highlighting the strong need for interpersonal relationships and a clear vision to lead others and to motivate them. We see here connection between self-awareness and also consciousness of self, both being components of the social change model and emotional intelligence, emphasizing the need for leaders to be introspective and understanding their own inner workings to lead others' effectiveness. Self-awareness, understanding one's own emotions, recognizing one's own strengths, one's own weaknesses. This self-awareness is foundational to social change model, as effective leadership begins deep understanding of oneself and one's motivations for engaging social change for efforts. Leaders who are emotionally intelligent are better equipped to articulate their personal values, visions, and can inspire others and mobilize them with their efforts. Here we see the connection between self-regulation and congruence, with both stressing the importance of leaders acting consistent with their values and also maintaining control over their emotional responses. And last, we see conflict resolution and controversy with civility, both components of both social change model and emotional intelligence, which encourage addressing conflicts in a manner that is respectful, constructive, and aimed for positive outcomes. Within social change framework, effective decision making and problem solving skills are crucial in navigating the complexities of leadership. Decision making and problem solving, ethical leadership. The leaders who prioritize the well being of themselves and their communities adhere to the values of justice, equity, and inclusivity, guiding their decisions towards a social positive change. And last here, we see the connection of motivation and commitment that both stress the importance of that internal drive that we have to have. As religious leaders motivate others on a weekly basis, it is important to have that internal drive and dedication in achieving not only personal goals, but having that to overlap as well into the organizational goals. By identifying the commonalities in emotional intelligence across different traditions, religious traditions, researchers can promote dialogue, cooperation among diverse religious communities. Ultimately, the research aims to contribute to a deeper understanding of effective leadership within the religious context. And this could have broader implications for leadership research and practice in various areas. So this study contributes to an ongoing discussion about the importance of emotional intelligence in leadership and provide a framework for religious organizations and leaders to cultivate emotional intelligence within their religious institutions. This study employs a phenomenological research designed to explore the lived experiences of religious leaders from diverse denominations and integrating EI into their leadership roles. A quote by Criswell in 2016, including all phenomenological studies, an emphasis on a phenomenon to be explored, phrased in a terms or a single concept or idea. Phenomenological qualitative research is a powerful approach that seeks to deeply understand the lived experience and subjective realities of those individuals. This type of study focuses on exploring the essential structures and the universal essence of the phenomenon from the perspective of those who have directly experienced it. Phenomenological qualitative research is powerful as it seeks to deeply understand those lived experiences. Based on the literature review, there were not many phenomenological studies completed. Utilizing this approach is a part of my rationale to the current literature in regards to these findings. So you may say, what is the importance and the applications connected to phenomenological qualitative research? To provide a deep exploration of lived experiences and subjective realities. It also informs counseling, clinical, and educational practices. It contributes to theory development by articulating the essential structures of the phenomenon. Phenomenological qualitative research fosters empathy and empirical understanding of marginalized experiences, validates and amplifies diverse voices and perspectives, and also facilitates growth, both personal and also personal reflection. As we move into the research design, this phenomenological research design allows for an in-depth exploration of how religious leaders navigate the complexities of their role while utilizing their emotional intelligence. The goal of this study is to provide a rich description of the lived experiences that honors the complexity and diversity of those individual perspectives. In the chapter 3 of my dissertation, I talked about data analysis not being completely in line with phenomenological inquiry because it means to break apart. Whereas phenomenological study seeks to understand the phenomenon as a whole, which led me to Colazzi's phenomenological descriptive method to use as the analysis. Colazzi's seven-step method was selected because it ensures analysis that is true to the participants' holistic experiences while providing a clear, meaningful insight on the studies. Colazzi's distinctive seven-step process provides a rigorous analysis that leads to a richer understanding. This study places a strong emphasis on honing the viewpoints of the perspective of the participants. So here we'll see that step one is to analyze the interviews. Step two is to identify key phrases, which moves us to identify what are the meaning of those phrases. Now, step four says, let's code and summarize those phrases. To lead to us, step five, describe the phenomenon across the categories. Step six means to identify the fundamental structure of the phenomenon. And step seven just basically means to validate that this information is true to the explanation from the participants. Other researchers that have used Kalasi's method is Beck's 1992 research when he explored the research of postpartum depression, a phenomenological study. Another researcher that used this method will be Karami's 2020 research when he explored the lived experience of nurses caring for patients with COVID-19. The 7 steps here are employed to help us to identify the themes in this research. So you may be asking, ChrisSharrah, why Kalasi? Why not InVivo? Why not Max QDA and all these other wonderful softwares? I have a quick answer for you. Kalasi's method was designed specifically for phenomenological research, emphasizing the deep exploration of the participant's experience. This method is well suited for studies because it prioritizes understanding the essence of human experiences that sometimes automatic tools cannot fully achieve. Kalasi's method is deeply rooted into phenomenological philosophy. This method emphasizes interpretive and human-centered nature on phenomenology. So let's get into some good stuff. Our sample and population. The sample and population are religious leaders, community variation in the size, religious diversity, using a propulsive sampling. The goal was to achieve a range of experiences and leadership styles reflecting a variety of different religious traditions. The propulsive sampling that was used in this study is homogeneous sampling. The homogeneous sample of religious leaders helps to identify common leadership characteristics and circumstances of the religious leaders. This study was conducted in Dallas, Texas, with a target population of religious leaders in the Christian community from diverse denomination organizations, including the Baptist organization, the Pentecostal organization, and also the non-denominational organization. Religious leader, the sample population there is participants from religious leaders holding senior leadership positions within their religious communities. From my dissertation proposal, it was suggested not only look at senior leaders as pastors, but ChrisSharrah, why not incorporate senior leaders that may have a dual role? And so we will explore that a little later, as we did incorporate senior pastors who sat in dual roles as both religious and business leaders. I explained the religious diversity. The aim is representations from diverse denominations, organizations, and also the congregational community size variation. This means leaders from religious communities of different sizes, being small, medium, and large, will be included in my study to consider potential conceptual influences. So what are my data collection strategies? Semi-structured interviews were conducted to explore the phenomenological reduction, intentionality, lived experiences, and meaning making. Phenomenological reduction is just encouraging the participants to bracket or set aside any preconceived notions. Intentionality is just exploring what are their intentions and motivations that is shaping their understanding of emotional intelligence. And moving to the data analysis procedures. Here we use thematic coding, horizontalization, eidetic reduction, member checking, data management. Phenomenological analysis techniques were employed to identify the essence of the lived experience, integrating emotional intelligence into leadership, the religious leadership of the participants. During the data analysis, the individual's ability to manage their emotions, communicate effectively, and navigate social interactions were explored. Thematic coding, the interviews were transcribed and also coded line by line. Horizontalization is basically taking those statements, which we talked about in collaging. And eidetic reduction also deals with synthesizing the description and the essence. Member checking, the purpose of member checking is to ensure that the themes and the interpretation that I'm receiving from the interviews accurately reflects that in the participants' intent, which we talked about in step 7 for collaging. Data management was making sure that the information was password protected. Moving into strategies for validity, here we use triangulation of data, was not just collected from the interviews alone, but also from observation to minimize the researcher's biases. Here we'll talk about really quickly the ethical considerations, informed consent, anonymity of confidentiality, the right to withdraw, data security, and also minimizing risks. Which leads us to chapter 4, the findings and analysis of the data. In this chapter, I will present the findings and discussion of the researcher's thematic coding and the analysis of the participant interview responses. Early on, I asked you to look at this study through a qualitative lens. The purpose is to explore the pivotal role of emotional intelligence through those qualitative lens. This has been my experience with the phenomenological research, as it is an immersive and a reflective process for the researcher. Grunwald said in his 2004 researches, basically summarized phenomenology as a deliberate intent to grasp the essence of phenomenon from the perspective of those who actually experience it, with the goal of articulating the human experience in its true form. Phenomenology involves intensive qualitative data analysis, where we immerse ourselves into the interviews and the narratives, looking for themes and patterns. So we started with a pilot study. A pilot study allows for the researcher to beta test and to refine their research design, to enhance researcher reflexivity, identify any challenges that may exist, and also to do beta testing. A pilot study gives the researcher an opportunity to reflect on their own assumptions, biases, and emotional reactions to the research. The impact on phenomenology, maintaining reflexivity, is key to bracketing personal biases and ensure that the findings truly reflect the participants' experiences rather than my own preconceived notions. In phenomenology, where the goal is deeply to understand the experience, it is crucial that the questions are open-ended, rich, and detailed for responses. So here, the pilot study helped me to ensure that my questions were effective in capturing the essence of the participants' experiences. I started with a pilot group of 2 as recommended by Cooper and Schneider's 2003 research. And in their research, a pilot of the interview, they conducted the questions with the religious leaders. My pilot was composed of 2 candidates who did meet the criteria, and from the pilot study, it did appear that respondents did have a clear understanding of emotional intelligence and how it related to their leadership. Individual data was analyzed comparatively to identify the essential commonalities across the participants. From the pilot, the information analyzed to identify the essential commonalities through familiarization, which is step 1 in the Colazzi's chart, identifying significant statements, researchers, and also identifying the meanings of those statements. I would like to pause here to talk about some of the things that came from the pilot study. For example, in the pilot study, leader 1 made the statement in regards to it is an important component of emotional intelligence to exhibit great interpersonal skills with congregants and to build relationships with others. Pilot leader 2 also stated, fostering relationships is deeply connected to emotional intelligence because it involves me understanding my congregants' needs and also managing my own emotions and recognizing the influence I have on others with my emotions. From Colazzi's steps, as listed on the screen, we formulated a meaning, clustered them, and also used participants' exact statements. Through eidetic reduction, I was able to understand the basic components of the phenomenon, which were fostering relationship, active listening, and reflective time with prayer. Moving into the main study, here you will see the participant demographics. As stated in chapter 3 of my dissertation, the religious leaders selected in this study are identified as RL1 through RL9, RL meaning religious leaders. Criswell's ideal sample size are between 3 and 25 participants for the phenomenological study. In this study, 15 candidates were solicited and 9 completed the interview, which means a total of 6 did not participate. 4 responded they did not have the opportunity to do it for time constraints, and 2 did not provide a response. Table 1 gives a description of the participants, their gender, if they sat in a door role, and also the experience and age of those participants. As I mentioned, one suggestion and feedback from our proposal was to solicit information from religious leaders that sat in door roles as both business leaders and religious leaders. And I am happy and excited to report 6 of the 9 participants occupied door roles. They range from nonprofit organization CEOs to hospital chaplains, hospice chaplains, regional sorority chaplains, and also faith and fitness business leaders. Let's take a look at those door roles. For anonymity reasons, I will not disclose the organizational name for those 6 religious leaders. I wish I could because it's good stuff. But they all sat in these door roles as senior pastor and also a business leader. Let's look into what those roles look like. A chaplain for a not-for-profit healthcare system in a southern state and also one of the largest in the United States. One of the participants is a chaplain for a hospice care company registered as a 501c3. We have a CEO and founder of a nonprofit organization focused on providing mentorship and personal training for teens. A chaplain for an international organization whose purpose is to provide assistance and support through established programs in the community. Certified biblical counselor and also business owner of Christian counseling company, and also a business co-owner for a faith and fitness company. So excited about my participants. Which leads us to talk about the participant congregational and community size variation. Gallup defines the church size on the number of regular attendees in a church congregation. While Gallup does not universally set the categories for the size, He did give us a similar interpretation of what typical categories would be. So here we will see the information for the participants and the community size in which they led out on. Religious leaders 3, 4, and 5 sat in the small. Religious leaders 2, 6, and 7 sat in the medium size. And religious leaders 1, 8, and 9 had large religious institutions. Other literature that used Gallup's defining size was Lim's 2013 research, when he did the research on counting the faithful, measuring local religious context within the United States. For the purposes of this study, I selected 3 participants from both small, medium, and large categories. The goal was to achieve deep detail, smaller samples for an in-depth process with the interviews. Data table 2 shows this breakdown. Table 3 shows the religious diversity. As we talked about, the religious diversities being the Baptist organization, Pentecostal organization, and the non-denominational. And you will see that up on the screen where religious 5, 7, and 9 sit in the Baptist organization, 3, 4, and 6 in the Pentecostal organization, and religious leaders 1, 2, and 8 sit in the non-denominational religious organization. Which leads us back to our overarching questions. How do religious leaders from diverse denominations integrate emotional intelligence into their practices? From the data collection strategies, you will see the phenomenological reduction. You will see the intentionality and the lived experience, and also the meaning making from the participants. It starts with how they perceive emotional intelligence. EI is viewed through the lens of religious teachings of values emphasizing compassion, empathy, and social awareness. Here we see emotional intelligence often linked with spiritual maturity and also moral integrity. Leaders with religious texts and teachings try to frame their understanding of emotional intelligence around their biblical beliefs. So when we look at the themes, they're listed here from the research. As I gain more knowledge from People's 2020 research, the literature encouraged me to understand fully this type of study. I should be asking, what is the lived experience of the participants? Through Colazzi's process here, we see the individual information from the interviews in these 5 themes that transpired. Each participant expressed personal stories, how they use emotional intelligence and perceived it. Participants describe levels of emotional intelligence and emotional distress as religious leaders. Each participant also described emotional intelligence during stressful times and controlling the negative behaviors that come from it. Some participants actively practice self-control and self-awareness. Most participants describe efforts to help the congregants utilize their emotional intelligence. I would like to take an opportunity to explain some of the information that you're looking at on the screen. If you look at the 2 bottom themes, fostering relationships and collaboration, and also general stress and prayer, you see across the board, all participants had statements to complement or reflect that they either foster relationships through collaboration, and also that in their role as religious leaders, yes, there is stress, but we combat our stress through prayer and meditation. As mentioned in chapter 3, the initial phase of the non-participants entail me to immerse in the data for familiarization and involve reading and rereading the interviews. This allowed me to understand the context of the lived experiences that went to the researchers leading to their statements. Here you will see statements from religious leader 2 that says, I found that effective listening is crucial in understanding and emphasizing with congregants' emotions. I validate their feelings by repeating and reflecting what they've said to me. Religious leader 6 said, active listening builds trust for them and empathy for me. These statements enable the researcher to develop meanings from the participants, which is outlined in step 4 of Kalasi's method. For example, we see active listening as being associated with thoughtful reflection, enhancing interpersonal understanding. These statements allowed me to formulate the meanings into coherent themes, which are seen on the screen above. All participants said they found that practicing self-control and self-awareness helped them in their role as religious leaders to deal with challenges. They also highlighted that active listening and reflection was key to building meaningful relationships with others at their religious institutions. Let's take a look at some more of the findings. Sub-question 1, how do religious leaders understand and make sense of emotional intelligence in the context of their leadership role? Some of the direct participant quotes for fostering relationships. Religious leader 1 said, fostering relationships is so important to understanding your relationship. As we understand ourselves as religious leaders and our emotions, it builds trust and connections with others. In regards to feedback, Religious Leader 9 said, it is very helpful when I receive and provide targeted feedback from congregants. This creates a trusted environment for me and the congregants I serve. The research questions centered on exploring emotional intelligence in the context of religious leadership. As we've seen, the identified themes here are fostering trust in relationships and feedback. I was also able to recognize the interconnection between the frameworks, social change and also emotional intelligence, as both approaches understand that influencing human behavior and relationships is correlated to leadership. These things reflect how religious leaders comprehend and integrate both social change and emotional intelligence into their role. Within this framework, we can also see here that common purpose, which is the component of social change, is also coming out here. And also, feedback is connected to common purpose because it makes the individuals feel helpful in contributing to the overall goal and vision for the religious leaders. Let's look at some more findings. Findings from research 2 shed light on perceptions of how the religious leaders integrate emotional intelligence into their roles. Here you see Religious Leader 2 saying, I found that effective listening is crucial in understanding and emphasizing, there goes emotional intelligence, with congregants' emotions. I validate their feelings by repeating and reflecting back what they've shared with me. This gives me awareness and empathy. Religious Leader 4 says, daily prayer and reflection makes me more sensitive and aware as I lead. By committing to understanding both my clients and my own emotions, an environment is created where everyone feels heard, validated, and motivated to work towards a goal. As I explored their intentions and their motivations, we see here that they were truly shaped by an understanding of emotional intelligence. Collaboration is a part of social change as it increases group effectiveness. The findings from these participants not only showed themes that correlated to both frameworks, but it examined how the two work together. Here you see personal reflection, you see empathy, active listening, leaders that prioritize active listening during pastoral care or counseling sessions understand emotional and spiritual needs. We see compassionate actions here, social skills, and also intentionality, which is explored through their responses. And so question 3, what challenges do religious leaders face in developing and utilizing emotional intelligence within their skills? All religious leaders highlighted the pivotal role of prayer in nurturing their emotional intelligence and acknowledged its influence on decision making. When we see here for training and support, Religious Leader 5 says, I try to offer leadership support and training to bring a level of professional consciousness to the church. Funding may not be easy to support these efforts for myself. Here we see there's a significant connection on support and training. Religious Leader 8, in regards to stress, says, as we resolve conflict above our members, they have a high expectation for our support and our behavior, which can lead to criticism at times. If I show emotional vulnerability or perceived weakness, this can be a stressful balance. Here with the findings, the significant observation was a formal lack of training, specifically in the area of conflict resolution for most religious leaders. We talk about the shortage of resources and opportunities within religious institutions that may hinder them from acquiring and honing in on these techniques. Here we see the intersection between social change framework of the controversy with civility and also internal challenges that may exist. We also see those external challenges as a organizational barrier, training and education, and also support, peer support. High emotional demand. Pastors often deal with emotional needs of many people, which can be draining. One of the things that came out was compassion fatigue. Constantly providing emotional support can lead to the stress and also compassion fatigue. As we look towards chapter 5, we will cover our implications, limitations, future scope, and the conclusion. Chapter 5, we see, as I went through the information in chapter 4, there is an empirical relationship and a correlation supported by observation and experiment, not necessarily by theme. It is called a phenomenological relationship. We see here the theme connected. Our question, how do religious leaders understand and make sense of emotional intelligence in their role? Through empathy and self-awareness, through fostering relationships and collaboration, active listening and reflection, and training and support. These things also answer the sub-questions that came. How do religious leaders understand and make sense of emotional intelligence in the context? Through empathy and self-awareness. In what ways do religious leaders integrate emotional intelligence competencies into their daily leadership activities? Through fostering relationships and also collaboration, active listening. And our third sub-question, what challenges do religious leaders face in developing and utilizing emotional intelligence within their leadership roles, training, and support? This framework was supported on exploring how emotional intelligence influences the effectiveness of leaders in religious contexts, also offers valuable insights. We see data from the study reveal positive of the general impact of emotional intelligence and religious leadership. The interviewees all concurred that having emotional intelligence brought positive outcomes, but also acknowledged the difficulty that may persist. Some surprises that came from me as the researcher was surprised at how much the participants shared and were willing to go deeper to explore some of their personal experiences. This allowed me to engage deeply and also be immersed into what the information they were given. I was very surprised at how I'm still having a lasting effect on their perspectives and beliefs and in understanding the phenomenon from the religious leaders. Relationship to the study, the relationship to previous research. We see here that Fry in 2003 research shows that leaders in religious contexts must possess high emotional intelligence. The findings of Goulian, Florent, and Tracy's 2011 research provided insights that demonstrate that leaders with high emotional intelligence are more likely to exhibit collaborative behaviors, which in return can contribute to their effectiveness as a leader. And we also see here in the research in the findings of Beeman that heighten the awareness of emotional intelligence of leaders to create sustainable small businesses during trying times. You may ask, so what is the contribution to this field? The contribution to this field are the themes of the lived experiences from the participants connected to both emotional intelligence and social change theory. These themes, feedback and support, practicing self-control, awareness, active listening, reflection, fostering relationships, collaboration, and combating stress through prayer and meditation are all connected to emotional intelligence and social change theory. In the 2010 study by Friedman and Everett, titled The Business Case for Emotional Intelligence, he also asserted that high emotional intelligence is strongly correlated to the performance and profitability of leaders, teams, and organizations. When we look at conceptual implications, the intersection of social change theory and emotional intelligence offers a powerful framework for leaders aiming to drive meaningful and sustainable change. Implications for practitioners and scholars are clearly grounded in the significance in chapter 1. These are tangible improvements for the business, which have resulted in chapter 4 from our findings. Here we see a conceptual implication will be leadership development programs could be mandatory for new leaders with the opportunity to eventually evolve a wider audience. Moreover, the findings also suggest that religious organizations should consider integrating emotional intelligence assessments into their leadership development processes to foster the overall health and growth. Combining these strategic aspects of social change with interpersonal skills of EI, leaders can create the environments of both dynamic and supportive, ensuring that change initiatives are successful and enduring. But to do this, it has to have a strategic approach, which is necessary in awareness and also interest, which leads us to the practical applications. The positive results outlined in Chapter 4 could have a significant impact on leadership workshops in religious institutions. The practical implications for scholars and practitioners suggest that leaders should form partnerships with religious institutions and other external stakeholders to possibly gather information for training and programs. The training and programs could cover just in-depth information about emotional intelligence, information on how emotional intelligence can be applied in their religious role, and also possibly offer simulations to assist with stress, group discussion, and how this relates to ministry sustainability. Recommendations for actions. The findings are particularly relevant to several stakeholders in a religious community and beyond. The primary audience will be religious leaders, clergy, denominational governing bodies, and religious institutions. Several interfaith nonprofit organizations are also driven by religious values, who will also maybe find this information interesting and also helpful to enhance their ability to accomplish their goals and also interact with their internal and external stakeholders. The findings of these results can be disseminated in peer reviews that focus on religious studies, leadership approaches, emotional intelligence, and also social change model. The dissemination of this information will effectively engage an academic audience and facilitate expansion on the research. Additionally, this valuable content could be shared at religious seminars, workshops, and also leadership development programs. The limitations of this study are it is limited to the participants' lived experience through a phenomenological qualitative format. The study samples demographics are limited due to lack of diversity in gender and geographical location. And the qualitative data analysis means the findings could be subject to other interpretations. As we look for our future scope, recommendations should continue to explore the nuances of emotional intelligence as we develop practical strategies for its integration into trainings and programs. As religious leaders explore and manage the complexity of bringing people together for a greater spiritual fulfillment, religious institutions can utilize emotional intelligence to explore. Further scope will be exploring gender differences in religious leaders, exploring other religions outside the Christian faith, and also expanding participants outside the Dallas, Texas geographic area. This is an original contribution to society by providing insight to perspective on emotional intelligence and religious leaders. This is unique as it focuses on the distinct disciplines of leadership, emotional intelligence, and religious institutions. I leave by saying that CEOs are hired for their intellect and business expertise, but they're fired for their lack of emotional intelligence. That comes from Goldman. Further research and practical initiatives are needed to fully harness the potential of emotional intelligence to cultivate spiritually relevant leadership across those religious communities. But religious institutions that prioritize emotional intelligence in their leaders and promote a culture of empathy, understanding, and open communication are likely to experience positive outcomes such as reduced conflict, increased collaboration and connection, and improved morale and retention at their religious institutions. Because I'm so passionate about this, I created my very own logo that embodies both frameworks, social change model, and also emotional intelligence. These are the references that are used in this presentation. And sending a big thank you to my family, my husband. Thank you so much for helping me to pronounce phenomenological studies, my friends for your support and love. Thank you to the DBA 2020 cohort. Though we started together and we're ending at different phases, we remain connected, the entire Northwood faculty and staff. And a big, huge thank you to Dr. Altama, Dr. Peters, and Dr. Lisa Fairbairn. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ChrisSharrah, Yancy, for an excellent presentation. Thank you. One particularly important highlight is your emphasis on how emotional intelligence not only enhances leadership effectiveness, but also strengthens the relationships between religious leaders and their congregants. And I think this is vital in any organization. Now, I would like to invite the committee members to ask questions, and let's start with Dr. Fabian.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ChrisSharrah, for your presentation. So I have kind of a high-level question to start with. So you mentioned that this is like the first time that, and we've had this discussion before, that the two frameworks that you've selected have been used together or integrated together in a study, right? Which is pretty neat. And you did a nice job of explaining the overlap, right? So talk to me a little bit about in practice. So like so the intersection of the social change theory and EI, you say that it offers a powerful framework to drive meaningful and sustainable change in organizations, right? So like what would your like high level answer be to like what that means in practice?
Thank you, Dr. Lisa, for asking that. From high level, what I would think would be the emotional intelligence competencies will speak to how the leaders can go in their role on a day-to-day basis and how they act with their leadership approach. When we combine in the social change model, I chose that to connect with emotional intelligence because it also connects the congregants and the leaders to outside of the religious institutions. So when we deal with the common purpose of the goal, it's not just about what our institution can do, but what is the goal in connecting with external stakeholders? Because most religious institutions have those partnerships with nonprofits, with local food feeding companies, different external partnerships that religious leaders and churches work with, and empowering those leaders to be equipped with both emotional intelligence as they lead within their organizations, and to apply controversy with civility, because conflict and resolution will come. This is how we do this, but let's remain connected to the common goal, which is still the competencies of social change model. So it's also just giving a more robust approach to not just staying within the leadership approach, but connecting to a social change and a greater cause outside of just your own individual leadership practices. I hope that explained it clear.
Thank you very much. I have two other questions. So through your interviews, do you think that all participants perceived themselves to be high in EI? And does that have any impact on the study?
I think there were a few who knew it was a growing process for them. I will say through the interviews, the senior religious leaders, they all explain experiences that allow them to improve their emotional intelligence. When they gave, I think in my dissertation, I talked about there was a domestic situation with one of the participants, and he used that to engage to say, hey, I need to get better on this. I need to be more self at how I handle this response. This is domestic, it's in-house, but how I handle in-house could affect what happens outside the house as I lead out these congregants. And so they all use examples of when they seen a moment where their emotional intelligence was improved. Mm-hmm. I do think overall they feel like they do have to have a high level of emotional intelligence as you lead out in others and you're counseling others. There's a awareness of self. There's a internal motivation. There's a level of empathy that you have to empathize with your congregants. And so I think they possess that. And I think they did as well, but they didn't come off as arrogant as they shared their experiences with it. So I do think they felt they had high level of emotional intelligence.
Thank you. My last question comes from, I think it was slide 57. But it was related to the business leaders learning from the religious leaders. I mean, I'm looking at your chapter 5, actually, the written chapter 5, and you say something like businesses can gain valuable strategies by studying the emotional intelligence of religious leaders. So it was something to that effect. You don't have to pull the slide up, but do you have any specific ideas from your research of if there are unique findings from religious leaders from your study that might be new?
It's actually swapped. So I believe that a lot of religious leaders could learn a lot from business leaders. In the business world, we have a lot of professional development, a lot of trainings, a lot of things that are poured into the organization there. As it relates to religious institutions, you may not see those leadership practices highlighted for the leaders there. And so, though there was an awareness of emotional intelligence to really hone in on training the religious leaders, they could take a lot from the business leaders in that sense. And so,
do you think there's anything that the business leaders could take from your findings?
Absolutely. Empathy matters. Fostering relationships matter. I love the last phrase I ended with CEOs are hired because of what they bring to the table, but a lot of people are fired because they lack that internal emotional awareness in treating people right. Going back to Maya Angelou's statement, people won't forget how you make them feel. And so we identified that people are leaving the workplace for reasons. And so I do think that business leaders could take some of this information that's been presented in this study and also apply it to their organizations as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Dr. Peters, you next.
So kind of going back, because I think that one of the one of the things that we want to see in a qualitative study, right, is this emergence of these themes that then can help us to inform practice. And so going back to slide 47, so you shared with us how all of the participants had something to say about, fostering relationships and collaboration, and then the power of prayer. But talk to us a little bit where you didn't see necessarily that complete integration. And so, for example, you can pick any of them. Some of, like, for example, your active listening and reflection, right? So you look at that one, and that's one of those areas where when we look across the research leaders, we don't necessarily see that being represented to the same extent that it is, for example, for those two themes that you identified for us. So as you kind of think about the responses, is there anything that you saw across those responses that gives some insight in terms of why that particular theme isn't necessarily more widely represented across the religious leaders that you actually interviewed?
Sure. I'll pick active listening because that was one that I actually observed. In regards to that, as it relates to religious leaders, most of the time they are the ones up talking, teaching, preaching, presenting. And so active listening may not be a skill that they are necessarily tapped in to hone into, to get a little bit more information and to understand. And I use this even as my own personal example. So with my dad being a pastor, a lot of times I'm sharing, I'm saying, hey, I just need you to listen, not to listen to respond, but use your active listening skills. And so not that was apparent with the participants, but that is something that I have identified that as a leader, a lot of time when you're presenting and sharing, that is a skill that you might not necessarily think that you should use more often, but it does build that trust, that connection, and that empathy. And I did a lot of that with Kalazi as I'm having to reiterate with them. So what he kind of shared with me, what do you mean by that? It's allowing them to explore, but I'm using active listening to dive a little bit deeper into those lived experiences. And so I do think active listening could be like one of the focuses of the trainings as we go into making it a practical application to just have that focus. And it's still, centered around social change and EI, but that will be like the focus for that week for that training.
So kind of, so I appreciate that vantage point, and I can certainly see the utility in that with how you might approach subsequent leadership development. Kind of what I want to do is kind of like close the loop here in terms of, so you talked about the research problem, and it's really kind of at the core of it is this issue around declining church attendance, right? So while churches are nonprofit, we do say that they are not for profit, right? They have revenues and expenses, and if they don't cover those, their sustainability becomes suspect. So you talk about the practical application and what this means, but I'd like to see you talk to us more fully about how you think the findings that you presented today ultimately impact that bottom line, that if I can become more skilled as a religious leader in developing my emotional intelligence and this ability to intertwine what it means to also move forward with social change, like in a bottom line vantage point, like what are the implications for that in terms of helping churches to reverse this concerning trend around attendance?
I think it goes back to one of the components of the social change model, which is collaboration and common purpose. The churches, and not just church, right? Because religious institutions could be a Chick-fil-A because they have religious values. But going back to the common purpose and a common goal, which is a part of the social change model, and also collaboration. If we bring people in to collaborate, to share, what are your visions? What are your thoughts? What are your goals? To connect with the overall common purpose of it, I think that could be a key goal into bringing people in. People want to be heard. They want their opinions to be heard as well too. Bringing them in for the collaboration and also the common goal. You went for a reason, or you attended for a reason. What's the common goal to bring you back? What's the common goal to make this institution sustain and grow, not just maintain, but be sustained and grow? So I think those two components of social change will be very important to those next steps of that.
So kind of the final, kind of wrap up to this is, what are your thoughts about, this becoming a framework that then informs practice, right? So you think about how now you have some evidence, right? You conducted this, research, and now you've got some insights. How do you think this then manifests itself in terms of a model that could be then used to consult with religious organizations to help them to build the efficacy of their leaders in these areas that you've identified around EI and social change?
I would love to take my personalized logo and put something personalized together and present it and make it work.
Yeah.
I did share with Dr. I that I was excited that one of the participants reached out and wanted to invite me to share this information to their leadership team. And so I think it has the potential to be grounded in something a little bit more concrete as I get a little bit more knowledge and build on the information that I've gained from the participants. But it is something that I will be thinking about further.
Well, I think one place you could start would be something, it was currently beyond the scope of your research because it's phenomenological study, but going back to something that Lisa said around understanding the leader's perceptions of their emotional intelligence. And so I imagine you actually doing an assessment of them in terms of gauging their emotional intelligence, and then using that as a baseline for then how you could then use that as a basis for developing training and development around, the frameworks that you've integrated in your dissertation to then begin to drive practice that then happens inside of in this case we're looking at churches, but obviously there could be a broader footprint as there. So that's all I got.
That's good stuff. I'm writing notes. I'm taking notes.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome. Well, ChrisSharrah, I only, because of the time limit we have, I only have one question for you, and hopefully we might have one or two questions from other faculty members. Otherwise, we might not have. But the last question I have for you is, what advice would you give to future researchers who are interested in studying emotional intelligence within specific cultural or organizational contexts?
My advice would be prepare to listen. Prepare for people to share personal experiences that connect them to whatever your emotional intelligence theme is tied to, whether it be in a religious context or in a different, but prepare to really be connected to what they're sharing, because phenomenological studies means that we are immersed into their world and their understanding. Prepare to put your preconceived notions, that word bracketing that I learned with phenomenology, we have to use that. Prepare to and also prepare to see how that feels for you, your own emotional response to what the participants are sharing. And prepare to reread if you're going to use Kalazi.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all of your answers. I will call on Dr. Todd for his question or comments.
Yeah, I just very quick. I know we're almost out of time, and I don't want to take all of it. First of all, it's really interesting what you're doing. I have started moving my consulting from corporate to nonprofit for the same reason that you brought up, in the sense of we know a lot about organizational success in business that often, especially small to mid-sized nonprofit organizations, have no idea. And so I really can relate to that thought. I did want to make a suggestion. I am not a qualitative researcher, so if you gave me a matching test, I might pass if I just have to say this name is this kind of research. But beyond that, I don't know anything. You have a slide number 36 that again, you don't need to pull it up right now. But I think as you're talking to people about your research, being specific about activities around each piece of that would be really helpful for them to understand kind of how you approached it. So, when you say that you're coding something, then having at least a brief explanation as to what that actually means, right? And even to the point of, did you transcribe the interviews? Did you use software to code them? Did you use other coders? All of that detail for those of us who are not automatically going to understand that would be something worthwhile as you think about how do you share this information going forward. That's all I have. Very nice job. Thank you for your work and for your presentation.
Thank you. So I think we have reached the time limit for these doctoral defense. So if there are any other questions or comments from anyone, please send them directly to ChrisSharrah. And so at this point, we will call these a close. Thank you, everybody, for attending ChrisSharrah Yancy's doctoral defense. And so at this point in time, the committee members and I will move on to a different room for our deliberations.
Thank you.
Ta-ta. Congratulations.
Nice work, ChrisSharrah. Thank you.
Thank you.